All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. I am really excited for tonight's event. This is Left Bank Books welcomes acclaimed author Jocelyn Nicole Johnson, who will discuss her major debut story collection, My Monticello. Johnson tonight will be in conversation with critically acclaimed award-winning author Walter Mosley. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Jocelyn and Walter, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. We offer in-store shopping, curbside pickup, and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We are happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a copy for you or for your friends at left-bank.com. Purchasing a copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to keep this event series going, bringing you incredible authors. So thank you so much for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. For you, the audience, we will be taking questions at the end of the event, so you can type your questions as a comment, and you can do that at any point in time throughout the event. And you can also just type a comment as well. Be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. Now, about tonight's book, My Monticello. Colson Whitehead, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Nickel Boys and Harlem Shuffle, says, "A badass debut by any measure, nimble, knowing, and electrifying." And side note, we are hosting Colson Whitehead at the end of the month for an in-person event. So very exciting. A young woman descended from Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, driven from her neighborhood by a white militia. A university professor studying racism by conducting a secret social experiment on his own son. A single mother desperate to buy her first home, even as the world hurtles toward catastrophe. Each fighting to survive in America. Tough-minded, vulnerable, and brave, Jocelyn Nicole Johnson's precisely imagined debut explores burdened inheritances and extraordinary pursuits of belonging. Set in the near future, the eponymous novella, My Monticello, tells of a diverse group of Charlottesville neighbors fleeing violent white supremacists. Led by Donatia, a young Black descendant of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, they seek refuge in Jefferson's historic plantation home in a desperate attempt to outlive the long-foretold racial and environmental unraveling within the nation. In Control Negro, hailed by Roxane Gay as one hell of a story, a university professor devotes himself to the study of racism and the development of ACMs, average American Caucasian males, by clinically observing his own son from birth in order to painstakingly mark the route of this Black child to one whom I could prove was so strikingly decent and true that America could not find fault in him, unless we as a nation had projected it there. Johnson's characters all seek out home as a place and an internal state, whether in the form of a Nigerian widower who immigrates to a meager existence in the city of Alexandria, finding himself adrift, a young mixed-race woman who adopts a new tongue and name to escape the landscapes of rural Virginia and her family, or a single mother who seeks salvation through buying a house ahead of the apocalypse. United by these characters' relentless struggles against reality and fate, My Monticello is a formidable book that bears witness to this country's legacies and announces the arrival of a wildly original new voice in American fiction. And there is a lot of praise for this book, a lot deserving praise, but I will read Roxane Gay's fantastic words. It is a rare breed of writer who can tell any kind of story and do so with exquisite deftness. Jocelyn Nicole Johnson is one such writer. Her debut collection, My Monticello, is comprised of 6 stories of astonishing range, and each one explores what it means to live in a world that is at once home and not. She dissects the unbearable burdens of such displacement. The crowning glory of this collection is the title story, a novella about a world that has fallen apart and a small band of people who take refuge in Monticello, among the old ghosts of the former plantation, how they become family and how they try to make a stand for their lives, for the world the way it once was. This collection is absolutely unforgettable, and Johnson's prose soars to remarkable heights. Now, about tonight's speakers. Jocelyn Nicole Johnson's writing has appeared in Guernica, The Guardian, Phoebe, Prime Number Magazine, and elsewhere. Her short story, Control Negro, was anthologized in the Best American Short Stories 2018, guest edited by Roxane Gay, and read live by LeVar Burton as part of PRI's Selected Shorts series. Johnson has been a fellow at Hedgebrook, Tin House Summer Workshops, and VCCA. A veteran public school art teacher, Johnson lives and writes in Charlottesville, Virginia. And tonight, Jocelyn will be in conversation with Walter Mosley. Walter is the author of more than 60 critically acclaimed books of fiction, nonfiction, memoir, and plays. His work has been translated into 25 languages. His books have been adapted for film and TV, and his short fiction and nonfiction essays have been published in a wide range of outlets from the New York Times to The Nation. He has won numerous awards, including an O. Henry Award, MWA's Grandmaster Award, a Grammy, NAACP Image Awards, PEN America's Lifetime Achievement Award, the 2020 Robert Kirsch Award, and the National Book Awards Distinguished Contribution to American Letters. And now, without further ado, I am so happy and proud to welcome for Left Bank Books our featured author, Jocelyn Nicole Johnson, and Walter Mosley. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much, Shane. Hi, Walter. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yourself? You're doing good?
I am.
You're happy?
I am.
Traveling around the country through the phone lines and computers and stuff?
Exactly. So, should I start by reading just a little bit from the novella?
That's what we've decided. You're gonna do a little reading first, and we'll get a little taste of your novella, and then we'll talk.
Okay, that sounds perfect. So, hi everybody out there. I'm going to read just the opening paragraph to the novella, My Monticello. It's told in the voice of Denasia Love, the protagonist, who's a descendant of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. We claimed it first, this little mountain, me and Ma Violet and a scattering of neighbors, all of us fleeing First Street after men came and set our row of 10-roofed homes on fire. The men came at dusk, blaring an operatic, "Oh, say, can you see?" White heads rose up from dusty jeeps, and dark hair thrashed in a harsh new wind like tattered flags. "Ours," the men shouted. Their rifles gleamed as if they'd only just been bought, a megastore militia. Through a hasty breach in Ma Violet's blinds, I even saw a boy among them, blond and sneering in a pickup window. Men leapt from back seats, sprang out of truck beds, and rushed towards the faces of our homes. White hands clutched metal canisters, swung torches spilling flames. Bright shouts, the rising haze of smoke, all that and more rousted us out. From our patchy front yards, we saw bodies blur as some of our neighbors charged forward to try to stop them. We saw a teen struck with the butt of a rifle, his temple spraying red. A toddler flailed, diapered and clinging to its mother's hip as she sank knees first to the sidewalk. What we saw in those moments riveted us, and then it set us free.
It's really, it's really, the novel's extraordinary. It's hard to use words like extraordinary, though. I mean, because I mean, it doesn't really say anything, right? It just means, well, it's different than ordinary, what I was thinking about it because, it's hard to think about a book like this where I'm talking about, my Monticello. It's like there's a real simplicity to the voice. And you have to understand, whenever I talk, the thing that I think is the most important about anything that anybody ever does is if it has a good deal of pedestrian detail and experience, and simplicity helps that. What are we seeing? How are we feeling? What did it look like? What did it smell like? Where are we? And I have questions to ask you about that. But before, I wanted to say it's an incredibly simple voice. It's a woman. She has some education. But her connection to the world is immediate and physical and familial. But it has an incredible complexity of the human animal. If you're reading about these characters, you're reading about this woman especially, but also all the people around her. You can almost smell them. You can almost hear them breathing. There's something so realistic, and reminiscent of Toni Morrison, certainly. Not her work, a different kind of work, but where you really, it's sometimes it's even cloying how animal people are. Not animal like, some kind of bad thing, but they're living, they're living beings. And there's a complexity, and then on top of this complexity, there's a complexity of daily life where how people just interact with each other. They're thrown together in this situation, and how they react to each other is extraordinary. I just, this complexity, the thing I love about it is as we have, I'll just use a film term, a flashback to something that the main character is remembering, Denisha. You also have life when it was in suburbia or when it was at the university, and it's just as riveting there as it is in, I'll put in quotes, the revolution. So there, I'm excited kind of all the way through it, because just of the characters that I'm encountering. So now, okay, and I said that. I just want you to know what I think, but so how do you come to writing? Like, what's your experience? When did you decide that you were going to sit down and do something like this?
So, first of all, thank you so much for reading this and for being here. And it's really nice and scary to have your work in the world and have people experience it. I really wanted, and I really appreciate when a writer invites me in. I like literary fiction, but I really want it to be accessible and for people to, be with characters and feel them intimately and understand them, even when they do things that are surprising. I've been really interested in visual arts and writing since I was a little kid. I loved drawing when I was a little kid. I used to draw all the time, and I would write stories and make things pretty much my whole life. I went to the Young Writers Workshop at UVA from Northern Virginia, where I lived when I was 17 years old. Mm-hmm. And in college, I studied visual arts and really prepared myself to be a teacher, but I kept writing on the side. I had several blogs that I wrote and started to write essays. And then when I was in my 30s, I took a class here in Charlottesville, Virginia, a nonfiction class with a writer named Lauren Winner. And she said, "Do you have an MFA? You should have an MFA." She read like the first thing I wrote, and she was really excited about it in this really careful and thoughtful way. And she like wrote on every sentence, like what she thought about it, and, and had this sense of care. And that's when I thought, maybe I should put even a little bit more care into my writing. And I started to take classes in the summer. So I've been a public school visual arts teacher for 20 years in Virginia, but every summer I would go and take sometimes the fancier and sometimes less fancy classes at places like Tin House and do workshops with people and found writing groups and so forth. So that's what helped me to hone my writing, but really writing and coming to writing stories was just something that I've always been interested in doing, and occasionally told myself I wasn't going to do anymore, but found myself continuing to do. So it's been a long time, and this is just the most recent project and my first published book project.
Yeah, well, it's really, it's interesting, because there's a way. You don't really seem to be the product of a university writing degree, which has its good and bad sides, to it. The idea of history. Marx is always talking about the dead hand of the past. Well, the dead hand of the past is definitely in the university, because they said, well, listen, the greatest writers, and they start with Homer maybe, and then they go over to Shakespeare and say, well, he's kind of modern. So, and after a while, there's a great weight that one carries, and there doesn't feel to be a weight in your fiction. I think there seems to be a desire to put everything in. Which is great, because it's all good and well if somebody wants to do that, but then they have to cut out stuff. But you were able, I think, to condense a giant world into a very small space, comparatively with the novella, at any rate. Something I don't think I ran across in the novella was, what year is it?
I didn't give a specific year. It's in the future. But I do give markers from Charlottesville of things that really happened here. And you can take them as literally as you want them to. We had the Unite the Right rally here in 2017, where very sadly a young woman was killed. And I reference her in the story, which could be a marker of time if you want to read time literally. And so,
but that was like a couple of decades before, right?
It was, well, the character's 21. And so this was when she was a girl in elementary school. So you can kind of create, so it's not so many years from now. The future I made, this, I think of it as dystopian light. It's not, I think some dystopian future is in a future where things are unrecognizable. This is, this is a future, maybe just inch forward a couple of years.
I don't think that's true. I like the notion. I mean, certainly you would never call this science fiction, but it's speculative, and speculative fiction. Updike was writing it, right? And it's just, I remember reading it, and he's always in this garage, with his Pinto or whatever it was, and this was the future, but he was in a garage with a Pinto. But I'm really moved by it, because there's a freedom that I feel that you've had to talk about, for lack of a better term, the Black experience, without saying having all these all this baggage of history and ideas and what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad, and who's people gonna get mad at me because it's an interracial couple inside of this thing. It's just like you just mix it all up, and I think just by breaking that one barrier, by saying this is in the future, this is, so it could still happen. It's not like it happened when that Unite the Night, that happened, right? This is in the future. It kept happening, and then finally things fell apart. But things didn't only fall apart politically; they also fell apart ecologically. And I was really wondering what you were doing there when you kept talking about the storms and the flooding and all that.
I'm super paranoid about how we're taking care of the earth and our planet. And I think that found a way into that anxiety, kind of, to me, relates to and weaves into some of the racial anxieties that underpin the piece. The idea that how we do one thing is how we do everything. The idea that how we treat one another is how we treat, the place that we live. And if we see it as something to plunder, if we see it as something to care for and to repair and to invest in. And so I think in that story and in the whole collection, I really talk about, or I just find ways to weave in that feeling too, because I think it is a pressure. I also think that when we, in the novella, I talk a little bit about how when we focus on denigrating a group of people on systemic or individual racism, then we're not able to focus on how to solve real problems that can serve as a way to avoid, to obfuscate other problems that we have and the way that the way our culture set up in response to the natural world and to the environment. I also think about infrastructure. I know that's a thing in this moment, but just this was way before this moment that I was thinking about this. Just if you don't take care of things, they crumble. If you don't take care of communities, they crumble. And I thought of it as almost like a cautionary tale. Like if we were to let these things continue to go and go, where might we be and what might we be left with?
It's an amazing thing, when you travel around in Europe, the Romans were everywhere. Like they were like the tourists, terrible. Anyway, but they actually built things that lasted 2,000 years. I mean, part of the sewage system of Rome, I think, was built back, before Christ. You don't talk about that, but I do feel that I did feel very strongly. There was like the atmosphere, the ecology was out there somewhere, and it was putting pressure on me. I felt it all through the book, and I thought that was really great. I mean, you're talking about ticks, which I really kind of loved, all those ticks, and you're talking about how people live, and in the simplest ways. But you also had these ideas, these great ideas, that I thought afterwards, well, if somebody asked me, they say, well, what does that mean? I'd go, well, I know what it means, but I can't explain it. So, for instance, when you say the body remembers, what are you telling us? What are your characters telling us?
So that phrase, I think, repeats through the story, and probably means a couple different things. But one thing I was thinking about was the weight of the past. You have this person who's a descendant of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, and she in her daily life does not really attend to that. Her life before this moment of trauma where she has to go back up to Monticello and take refuge there. But she still has a feeling about it. It still lives in her body. I think there's a way that both symbolically and then in the day-to-day for people who've had a traumatic event in their life, even if they have stories about it that are untrue, their body will remind them through chronic pain, through, people, you think of what PTSD is, it's like that not separation. You're still in the moment of trauma, even though that happened 20 years ago. Even if it happened 20 years ago, you're physically feeling it that way. And I was thinking about that just in relationship to this character, but trying to think about it in relationship to whole communities of people. How even when we, go through our lives and look for the best and try to do the best, there's a way that we can still have, especially untended to trauma, can affect how we are, how we feel. There's a weight to it. And I wanted that weight to be in the story, that the past was still present and not really tended to for these characters.
And really, I'm going to expose one of my great failings. I'm really bad. My whole entire life I've been bad with names. And there's a West African novelist whose name I've forgotten, but who I know. I mean, I spent time with him before. I just forget names. But he used to, one of the things that he would say was that if you have a young girl, and a man comes up and hits her with the butt of his rifle, that's not the end. The pain and the brutality sink into her body, and it goes a long way in there, but sooner or later it's going to come out again. He used to always say that. And I thought, that's one of the things I thought of when we're reading this, is that, you have there's scientific things, the body has DNA, for instance, you have PTSD, but it's also a call and response where somebody says something and you hear it and you have to reply, like a wolf hearing another wolf howling over on that other mountain. You say, well, okay, I'm gonna start doing that too, because that's what we do. But I was thinking also with your when you were talking about, the body remembers, I kept wanting to, I felt like it was like one shoe and I'm waiting for the other shoe. I mean, really all through it. This is not a criticism. It's just the way I've kept, and I kept on, and I couldn't come up with the answer, but I kept on wanting to say something like, yeah, well, the body remembers, but the mind forgets. I just, it's like what we don't know. What we don't know is monumental. I talk to people all around nowadays. They said, well, they've disproven Freud. And I said, they disproved the unconscious? And they go, well, it's not that. It's just that it's science. I said, well, Freud said it was going to be science. There was, you have that, because, people, he's unpopular for a variety of reasons. And it's so easy to cancel things, if you don't agree with it. But I was really taken. I was really taken by that, but just even that alone would have made the novel completely worth it to me.
Can I say one more thing? With that phrase too, there's that side of it, but I also have this character who has an old love interest there, and so the body remembers also used to evoke this care that she had for a person in the past. So it's not just bad things that we remember. It's good things. It's a way this familiar person is, attractive to her, and that she's drawn to him as well. So I think it goes both ways, that memory that we have.
Well, that brings up another question I want to ask. I don't want to give away the book, really. Though having talks like this is kind of hard not to give some stuff away. If we're now another 10 years later, after the already 10 years later, and I came across Denisha, and I asked her, what do you feel about love? What is love in your life? I know about what would she say?
I don't know what the answer to that question is. What would she say?
I think you wrote the book. Oh no, I'm just kidding.
I think that there's a way in the story. I'll go back to what's actually there, where she kind of has a moment of the revelation of what love is to her, which is absolute connection between not only the people that are there with her on Monticello. This, for those of you who haven't read it, it's, there's a whole group of neighbors, a really diverse group of neighbors, her grandmother, a few people that she knows, but mostly neighbors from her neighborhood that flee together to Monticello. But then also she has connection. I think she says, even the bunnies in the garden, she has this connection, especially the trees, she says. There's this, and then she kind of evokes connection to the past. So for her, I think love is the sense of connection between all the things. And that is what, I'm a public school teacher, so I'm all about the the circle with hands around. That's her thing.
Yeah, but that's not easy, right? You say that, and I believe, of course, you're thinking it, but I'm like, there's such a beautiful complexity of intimacies in that centered just around her. It's not about the skinheads. It's not about the marches and the killing and the racial conflicts and stuff. She has a real complexity of intimacies, and that's what it's such a big part of the book. And I have to add, it's really hard to make that kind of story, which feels like a small story because it's in somebody's heart, a part of a much larger story. But I think that you did it beautifully. So me asking is because I think, well, love is really important here. And it might be an answer to the problems that these characters are encountering.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. I like it. It's just a simple answer. Yeah. All right. I won't go on with that, but you know what I mean, like how I'm feeling. I'm telling you how I'm responding to it in that way. But let's go. What do you think about Thomas Jefferson?
I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. We have the University of Virginia, which is Thomas Jefferson's, beloved university. We have Monticello is about 10 minutes from my house, driving right out of town. I live in the neighborhood in the story, basically. I live right adjacent to First Street. We have the Tom Tom Festival. We have a lot of just reminders, and there's this kind of shadow of Thomas Jefferson here. But to be honest, I didn't and don't think of Thomas Jefferson very often. It isn't something that's omnipresent in my mind. I've gone to Monticello the way a tourist would. As a Black person, I definitely have a sense, especially going in the distant past, they've changed the story has changed over time. In the time I've lived here, when I first went there, the way they talked or didn't talk about slavery was very different than now. And I talk about that in the story. But I definitely had this sense of being slightly outside of the place and just a certain kind of skepticism, just an awareness of something that was being left out of the story. I think Thomas Jefferson is an amazing person. He has a lot of interesting things about him. And I just think that, like all people, I want to bestow that kind of care and thoughtfulness to other people who called Monticello home too. It's not a, just taking him down. It's just a broadening, and to make him not a godlike figure, but a human being that all, contained, contradicting, and complicated truths.
Yeah,
I just think that's true. And so I'm not super, super into Jefferson, but I'm not, I'm not like, boo, cancel Jefferson.
But that's the thing, because in life, a lot of people, in order to function, say, well, either it's godlike or it's satanic, right? There's this, you're either good or you're evil. And it feels to me all through the book, even the worst characters, like the white boy that you mentioned in the very beginning, first paragraph, even him, I don't find myself like hating him unless I would have to come up with stuff on my own, not from the book, in order to hate him. But he's, certainly, what do you call him? An antagonist. He's an antagonist, and represents a whole group of antagonists. But the voice of this novel is very, very even about how it sees the world around it, even when it's going, crazy. And so that's the thing I think about with Jefferson. So you talk a lot about what Jefferson, did and what he thought and what he wrote, and then and what he wrote was very contradictory, and then if you look at that in the right way, or at least that's what I'm saying, the right way, then you say, wow, that's like me. I say that, I say things that are completely contradictory all the time, and people always hold me up for it, and so that's why I'm asking you, because I think that you have a really deft control of what it is to be human inside of this world of systems, atmospheric systems, technological systems, political systems, gender systems, and I'd like to because really when I say complex, the book is about a very complex woman who, in her mind and her heart. And so I could spend the whole time thinking about her, but it's also about these other characters who sometimes I wished I had more from, the two men in her life, I kind of wanted some more from them. I mean, but it's not my novel. I'm not writing it. So like, you can say, well, yeah, you want it. Well, you go write your novel. That's what I tell people when they ask me to say things like that to me. But then you have race. You have all of these, for instance, you have all of these different races of people in Monticello hiding, from the kind of the negative space of the novel, the antagonist of the book. I think I know, but what's going through your mind when you brought all those different peoples together?
Well, it's a couple things. One is, like I said, I taught public school art for 20 years, and I absolutely believe in that project of public spaces. We may in our lives surround ourselves with people who are similar to us in whatever kind of way. But I think it's really interesting to be pressed together into a classroom with other people who happen to live near us, and hopefully are a range of different kinds of people from different communities who've had different experiences. And so I like that, and I wanted that to be true. And I think it's emblematic of our country and, the issue that we have of how are we going to share this space, and not only share it, but appreciate and like work together in it. Also, the real First Street that I imagined is a diverse street. Our neighborhood is diverse. There's been, there are people from all over the world. There are immigrants from all over the world. There are people of different races and different experiences. The streets around First Street have been gentrified. There's been all this development around it. So I have characters that are neighbors who live in the nicer, in the houses adjacent to First Street. So it was just realistic to have a variety of people. And it's aspirational for me. That is something I value, the ability to have spaces where we can work together and find commonality. And so it's my book, so I get to make that happen. And contrast. I mean, I think this book for me was an answer. It was a response to people coming and saying, unless you look like me, then this is not your home and you shouldn't feel safe. And so my response is all these people are valuable, and I want to place them together and have them, have a night in the museum in Thomas Jefferson's house. And I want them to be able to touch everything. And I want them to find community, even though it's not going to solve the problem of what the other people are saying. It's not going to be all kumbaya by any stretch, but I certainly wanted to place them there and say that it was important that they were there together, and they were a variety of people. I really appreciate that you said that it resists making, even the bad people in it, they just really aren't explored. The antagonist, there's an evenness. I really appreciate that. That's something that I really value in fiction. I love when a character, I'm with them in their humanness, when they're doing things I agree with and things I don't agree with. And I feel like those kind of stories are interesting to me. So I'm often going to go there with the way that I have a character think about people, not just to say this person's all bad or all good. My main character has, her moments where she's doing things we might not agree with or that we might feel.
Really?
You think?
I don't think I ever disagree with her. One time when she didn't tell everybody else something that had just happened.
Yeah.
I went, that's a failure on her part. I thought that, but that was the only time I thought it in the book.
I think that, but also she's not completely honest with the people around her that she cares about in a way that is creating complication for her.
Yeah, but complete honesty is overrated, as friends
Absolutely.
of mine would say. I mean,
well, we aren't honest. Yeah, we're not honest all the time. That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. So I have two more questions. I'm seeing here that in 5 minutes we're going to do quick Q&A. So I have two more questions. How much of this is your story?
This is not my story. The story of Denasia is really imagined. I don't feel like she of course it's me. I mean, everyone in the story is me in a way, because I can only do what I imagine, but the way that she sees the world is not, it's not super close to how I see the world, except for in her idea about teaching and about that piece of her is me. But I would say a lot of the other, I don't think she's me. I really don't. I think she's her own character.
I'm just wondering. Also, so are you still teaching?
So I stopped teaching in the spring of 2020 during the pandemic. After that school year, when the pandemic had started, I sold the book that summer, and I decided to focus on writing. I've been teaching and writing on weekends and at night and in summers for the last 20 years. So I thought it'd be really interesting to see what it felt like to have the space and time to finish this book and then write another one.
Interesting is a small word. It's magnificent to be able to write every day. It's such a freedom. All right, just one more last thing, and this is just me, and I feel like the boy. I'm a boy reading this book, thinking, what does this remind of all the stories that are in my head? What does this story remind me the most of? And it's that thing. Remember the Alamo. Did you ever at any one point think about that in writing it?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't at all.
That doesn't surprise me that you don't, but you can understand why I'm saying it, right? Or maybe not. It has, and I think it's a beautiful juxtaposition, because it's political, and it's a one group sense of being right and being willing to give up everything for being right. I'm right, and so you will not pass. And I'm just I find it, and it's I know too much now, so I can't get too much into the Alamo. But when I was a kid, that was like, it was such a patriotic way to be, and I do feel that there's a great deal of patriotism in this novel. Believing in yourself and your people and your world, in completely it's not even opposite. It's more different than opposite of, the Alamo. But indeed, it's a similar system. And I listen, I hope that doesn't insult you. It's just that it hit me, and I went, wow, this is like America all the way down to its foundation, which is
Yeah.
Go on. What you were saying?
Well, I just think there's this way that I'm thinking about America by its own, throughout the collection, by its own, you have your stated rules and your stated idea of yourself versus how you actually operate and the actions that you do. And I think if you take the most aspirational pieces of that and take it literally, that's what I'm playing with in the story against Jefferson, with these people who are actually trying to embody some of those things.
All right, now we're going to go do Q&A. I just want to ask one more. I don't even just want to say, there's two guys who are running the place, and one of them is afraid to have all these people here. But then he said, listen, if you I just have to let you go. And his response moved me the most in the whole thing. I don't know why, but
Georgie once, he says, the caretakers, I really wanted there's two caretakers that are docents or guards of Monticello, and they remain with the group. And I like Georgie.
Yeah, it was really beautiful, because I think that, just in that really little twist, kind of like Gogol, you could get, all you had to do is write a sentence or two, and I felt so much for him. Anyway,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
First off, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. It is such a pleasure to have both of you here this evening. I want to remind the audience to type up questions in the chat. We do have Richard saying hi, Jocelyn. But I wanted to, my personal question, I am a humongous fan of novellas. I think they are like if everything could be a novella, that would be like my perfect world. Because I want to experience so much of fiction, but they've kind of not been as they're not as popular as they once were. A lot of times it is more popular in genre fiction than it is in literary fiction. So I wanted to ask both of you if we can make a resurgence of the popularity of novella in literary fiction happen. I would love that. And where you think the genre can go.
Oh gosh. I feel I'll just say this. I so love short stories. I read a lot of novels as well. I love short stories. And the nice thing about a novella, I mean, there's novels I want to read that are like super long, and I'm just like, I really want to read that, but I want to be in so many, I'm like a museum wander, and I'm like that with fiction. I want to be in so many people's heads. Like I want to go from this to that and read this against that. And so what I love about a novella is it lets you do that, right? Because you can be fully immersed in someone's story. It's long enough that you're really in there with them, but then you can like read something right next to it that's different. You can take it in, it has some of the qualities of a short story and some of the qualities of a novel in this kind of really fine way. I don't know where just as a form, I mean, I guess what you're asking is also about publishing and the saleability of something and whether people see it as valuable to put it out there in a form that readers can find. I hope that I was so excited that my publishers allowed me to put a novella with 5 short stories in front of it in this weird configuration. The only other person I'd seen right at this moment that did that was Danielle Evans with the Office of Historical Corrections, which came out right before, I love her, and that was really great. But I hadn't really seen that configuration a lot in contemporary times. So I hope that books, whenever a book comes out like that, it hopefully paves the way for maybe this is another way we can make things informed. We're just so like creatures of habit, and we want to, publishing wants to make things that look like other things and make it fit into a thing. And I'm always so happy when something's like just weird and doesn't fit into the thing and still finds its readers and finds its people and is in the world and creates another path. Because it's all stories and there's space for all of it.
I think what you said, Shane, saying, well, in genre fiction, the answer is in genre fiction. I think people want to read novels. So what you do is you just take a novella and you make it a little higher pitch for the characters, and you say it's a novel. People buy it and they read it and they say, "This is great." That's it. But we could get down to like how do you change things or change perception and stuff like that. It's kind of unnecessary. Just listen. My Monticello is a novel. It is. It's short. It's a short novel, but it's a novel. It works perfectly, in that form. There's a big difference between short stories and novels. Short stories, poems are like diamonds. Short stories are like crystals, and novels, it's like Ian Forster, 50,000 words more or less of spongy prose. You're telling a story. If the woman's wearing a red dress, it's just a red dress in a novel. In a short story, there's a reason that dress is red, that's the difference. And I think that at this point, the novella here, it's gotten to the place where it's expanded. You can take a deep breath in it, which a lot of people like when they're doing reading. So say, well, this is my novel. I read it like a novel. I didn't, that's what I thought.
I want to mention that, so I'm listening to the book from Libro.fm, which is a fantastic independent audiobook company that supports independent bookstores. So that is a fantastic way to do this book because you get to experience LeVar Burton reading the first story, which is stunning, absolutely stunning. So I have unfortunately, I got the book yesterday as an audiobook, so that is as far as I am. But
the book came out yesterday, right?
It did. Yeah. I'm making progress. But a lot of the things that you have talked about are specifically about my Monticello relate to that story as well. So, Jocelyn, I'm wondering for you, what was the thread that you were hoping would connect all of these?
So the first story, the inaugural story, Control Negro, was kind of the place where I realized what I was doing that connected everything together. And the novella that ends the book and is the majority of the book, the vast majority of the book, was the last thing I wrote. And so those kind of bookend. So with Control Negro, I realized that I was writing about Virginia. I call it like a really upside down love letter to Virginia. This is the place where I was born. It's the place where I went to college, where I grew up, where I have taught public school for 20 years, and different parts of Virginia. And so I really drew on that. But then I was also thinking about belonging kind of in this bigger way, and the ways in which I feel at home in Virginia and the ways in which I feel less than at home in Virginia, particularly in recent times, both politically and environmentally, just the ways I feel in conflict with that idea of being at home. And so I think those two things, the idea of this place I love and know, and trying to fold in just so many little details of things that I've seen. Even in that first scene I read, there's a place where a mom lifts a baby, and that comes from something that happened when I was walking, and this toddler came out and put its arms up to me, and I held it. And so it contains like a real experience that happened to me, even though it's totally, turned around in the story. And this idea of home and belonging.
Did it already happen where you're doing an event with Monticello?
I am. That's coming up next week.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about like how big a deal that is, and how, 10 years ago, they were still kind of, well, I don't know if they were denying, but Sally Hemings was kind of still a controversial figure for the Thomas Jefferson fan base.
The fan base.
So I want to know like how that's been and what their kind of change of position has been.
Absolutely. Well, I think they've slowly, I don't know the exact, dates of when, but since I've been here, I've seen a dramatic change in how they talk about Sally Hemings, how they talk about the Descendants. And I have to give them credit. They've done a lot in the last, at least the last 5 or 7 years to reach out to the Descendant community. They have the Getting the Word Out project and all these other things where they not only outwardly facing, but inwardly facing have brought that community more into that space. So my husband's aunt was a museum curator, and she read the novella really early on and said, you have to talk to Monticello. And she's like this old school Southern lady. Anyway, so I reached out to them really early on, and it was like a little bit of crickets, but they said, yes, send us a book. But then once they read the novella, they actually were open to being a partner in the project and really were interested in it and exciting about it. And I've been up there for a photo shoot for that New York Times piece. I've been up there because the novella is getting adapted into a movie, the screenwriter went up there and got a special pass. I haven't even gotten a special pass. I just went on the regular tours, but they took him on a private tour around. And I think I definitely think knowing that it was going to be something in the world, they embraced it. They could embrace it or not, and they really did. So I'm really, really happy that they did.
Actually, they couldn't not. They have to embrace it. Let's just be clear. They if they refused anybody talking to them, and all of this stuff happens in the world around it, that would not be good for them.
I don't think it would be good for them, but people do things that aren't good for them sometimes. So I'm glad that they.
I know. I'm not trying to mess with Monticello. I'm just saying.
You can mess with them. Oh no.
Okay. It fell, not me.
Okay.
Fair enough. At any rate, so it was just a slow reaching out really early, letting them know. Also, they were really kind because I really wanted the descendant community to know I was doing the project early. So they allowed me to kind of put a couple announcements out there through their network. I felt like that was just a reasonable, respectful thing to do.
Can I ask I just remembered I didn't ask a question, because there are sentences in the story that I liked so much, and one of them, which I stopped, and it was funny because I don't know why, but you said time had started up again. What does that mean to you?
There's this way in the story that it's kind of a held breath. So they all get up there, they rush up to Monticello, they're in the house for 19 days, they're trying to figure out how to survive, and they feel there's a sense of fear, but there's also the sense of refuge, and the outside world is not a part of their world for this period of time. They're in their own little bubble, and they're kind of figuring things out. And then there's a point in the story where they recognize the outside world is still, things are still happening and danger is approaching again. So in that moment, the clock is back on, the world is there for them again. Also, just Monticello is filled with clocks. It's filled with all these objects. One of the funnest and most pleasurable things in writing it was filling it with it just had so many objects that were just ready to be used as symbols in the story, the way the beds look, the way all the gadgets, all the things. And so, there's just some great clocks there. So there was a sense of we're here, we're they start this clock where it's going to resound into the valley, and they're recognizing that they're part of the world and they're going to have interaction with the world again. Whether they want to or not. And
I completely accept that. It's just that when I read it, I felt you were saying something to me. It's really, there's a deep kind of like, subterranean thrumming when I hear that, time to start up again. It's almost like a call to arms, which again reminded me of the Alamo. I just want to say, yeah.
I think that when we write, I love this. I mean, I don't mean that writing isn't a craft and that you're not thoughtful of what you do, but there's so much there that you couldn't purposefully put there, and that you see and you might excavate around and kind of prop up a little bit or shine up a little bit. So I'm just going to say that whatever you saw in it was there. I did that on purpose.
Well, that's true. I mean, I do the same thing all the time. I say, oh yeah, people say things like 10 times smarter than I'm ever going to be. And I go, yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. I'm glad you figured out. Most people don't.
Exactly.
All right, well, I want to end with one last question for both of you. So, Walter, you had a book from Easy Rollins come out this year, and the paperback for Awkward Black Man, and you had a book of Writing Craft come out last year. And Jocelyn, your book just came out yesterday, but I want to know where we are going next with both of you. What can the audience get excited about from both of you?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I don't know. The older I get, the busier I get, which is really weird. I'm out here in LA. I'm working on the series started by John Singleton and others, Snowfall. So I've been writing on that show, and I'm doing it. And I'm writing on a couple of other shows. I'm trying to do a couple of movies, which will be fun. I'm writing a new Joe Oliver novel. The detective named after the man who taught Louis Armstrong. And I think I made a deal with Amblin to do an Easy Rollins series, and so I think we may do it. It's always hard. You can never count on anything in Hollywood, but I can count that we're going to try. It's got a good idea, got a good team. So that's that. That's what I'm doing.
How are you doing so many things? That's incredible.
Well, no, when you don't have that other job, and every day you write for that, like maybe 3 or 4 hours, at the 3 or 4 hours, they don't change in time, but they expand. I've been doing it for 30 years, and there's so much more you can do because there's so much going on in your head that you don't have to concentrate on until you sit down anyway, your turn, answer the question.
That makes sense. So I think it's a miracle anything comes out that's like a form story. I have some stories that I'm still working on, but I don't know exactly what I want my next full project to be. I don't know if it will be these stories that are kind of percolating and a few that are written, or if it will be something longer. I'm kind of interested in being in one world for a while, and I have an idea that I'm working with, but I don't know what will happen when I feel like I'm in a whirlwind right now of this book coming out, my first book. And I've said this before, but it's really true. I'm starting to I'm starting to email myself sentences, which I know means that I'm wanting to write. Like I see something and it's like, I already see the story in it. Just like I drive by someone and they're like doing something strange. And I'm like, oh, I have to write that down. So I'm really excited for the quiet that's going to come after book promotion, to have the focus to be able to pull it together into something. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. When you say in one world, does that sound more like a novel or just a short story that's really, really concentrated?
I told myself the whole time I wrote the novella that it was just a long, short story. I mean, it really is just words. Like, what does it mean? It needed to be as long as it needed to fit those, so yes, more of a novel, more of a single thing. Just being in one thing, I think sounds interesting to me. I think when I am in one thing, though, it will have these pieces to it, because that's how my mind works. I want to have like some different pieces to it so that I can diverge here, go there. So we'll see how that looks.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you so much. We have copies of both of your books available for sale at left-bank.com. I dropped a link for a pretty big chunk of books available for sale from both of you. And I want to thank the audience for being here this evening. A little bit shy tonight, but still here, and we are still very thankful for that. And both of you, thank you so much for this conversation. Congratulations. I'm so happy to welcome this book into the world for Left Bank Books.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much, Walter.
We'll all meet again somewhere else.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.